Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. J.K. Rowling only briefly mentioned Gringotts in her books, but behind its walls lies much more than it seems at first glance. Today I invite you to take a look at some curious facts about the legendary vault of the wizarding world. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Slightly extreme security measures. Security at Gringotts is a story in itself. The level of protection depends on the value of the vault's contents. Simple safes like those owned by the Potters or the Weasleys can be opened with an ordinary key, but Flamel's vault, for instance, is completely inaccessible without the participation of a bank employee and his biometric data. In the most important cases, extreme measures are applied. For example, in the films we see a blind dragon guarding the Lestrange vault. Other vaults may be protected by powerful enchantments that even experienced wizards cannot break. Number 2. Use of probity probes. The internal security system of the bank is no less interesting. Probity probes are thin golden metallic devices that goblins use to check visitors for hidden spells. Argus Filch at Hogwarts employs similar enchantments. When Harry, Hermione and Ron ventured into Gringotts in search of a Horcrux, it was the Imperious Curse that distracted the goblins. Otherwise, Hermione's disguise as Bellatrix Lestrange could have been exposed on the spot. Number 3. A system for exchanging Muggle money. A special department of the bank deals with exchanging Muggle currency for wizarding money. This is necessary if only because many Hogwarts students come from Muggle families and enter the wizarding world without galleons. It is intriguing to wonder how the goblins handle the received Muggle money and where they channel it so as not to arouse suspicion among Muggles. Rowling never gave a clear answer to this question. Number 4. Named after its founder. The bank was named after the goblin Gringott, who lived in the Middle Ages. Very little information about him remains. Apart from the bank itself, he was immortalized on a chocolate frog card, as well as in the form of a golden statue near the Gringotts building in Diagon Alley. Number 5. Founded in 1474, Gringotts is one of the oldest financial institutions in the wizarding world. Its founding date is 1474. How wizards stored and exchanged money before that remains a mystery. By the way, the currency system of 29 knuts to a sickle and 17 sickles to a galleon raises more questions than answers. Number 6. Twice changed hands. Almost immediately after its founding, the bank fell under the control of the Ministry of Magic, most likely not without pressure, since goblins and wizards rarely got along. Only a few centuries later did the ministry decide to return Gringotts to goblin control. Perhaps the goblin rebellions of the 18th century had something to do with this. Number 7. Motto. The bank has a motto in Latin, Fortius quo fidelius, strength through loyalty. What exactly its authors meant remains unclear. If goblins came up with it, then perhaps it refers to the unity of their people in opposition to wizards. However, the word loyalty in a banking motto sounds rather mysterious. Number 8. Underground depths where one can get lost forever. The vaults stretched farther than Harry ever imagined, tunnels curling into blackness where no lantern could reach. Even goblins admitted they did not know the full map. Deeper than dragons, one was overheard saying, a phrase that chilled more than it explained. In Philosopher's Stone, Griphook warned, if anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there. His words hinted at endless chambers and protections stacked like layers of earth itself. The further one went, the less the tunnels seemed like human work, and more like ancient passages carved before wizards kept records. Stories told of creatures lurking in those depths. Some spoke of whispering shadows, others of beasts that fed on magic itself. An old tale recalled a wizard named Edgar Bones who vanished while exploring forgotten shafts in the 1940s. His family received nothing but a broken wand, scorched black, returned by goblins without explanation. Rumours grew that parts of Gringotts led not just to vaults, but to something older, hidden beneath London. For those who strayed too far, the tunnels offered no way back. Number 9. magical carts and their secret mechanism. Harry's first ride in the cart beneath Gringotts was unforgettable. The rails twisted like a serpent, plunging into darkness, yet the cart never slowed or swerved off course. "Can we go slower?" Harry shouted over the roar of the wind, Philosopher's Stone. Hagrid only gripped the sides, pale and sick, while the goblin leaned calmly forward, never touching a lever. The cart seemed to think for itself, turning down tunnels without command, as if following a path no human eye could see. Goblins whispered that the carts were bound by more than metal. Some claimed they were tied to the blood of goblin kind, reacting only to their presence. Others believed the magic was older still, a spell woven into the very stone of London. That explained why the carts never collided, never faltered, even when a dozen vaults lay hidden in the same passage. Wizards speculated about enchantments, but the goblins never answered. One story told of a ministry official who tried to map the tunnels using Muggle instruments. Every drawing came out blank, the lines vanishing from the page the moment ink touched parchment. The only record was his own memory of being hurled through the dark, heart hammering, convinced the cart had chosen his path without him. To this day, no wizard has ever explained how the mechanism works. It remains one of the deepest secrets of Gringotts, proof that in the goblin's domain, even stone and steel obey their magic. Number 10. Ban on magic inside the bank. Inside Gringotts, wands meant nothing. The marble walls drank in spells, turning power into silence. Wizards who tried to cast charms or hexes inside found their magic twisted against them, as though the bank itself rejected their defiance. This ban was not written on parchment but woven into the stones, an enchantment older than the ministry, and it made Gringotts unique among wizarding places in Britain. Harry learned this truth in his very first visit. Hagrid warned him sternly, "Best not be trying any funny business in Gringotts, Harry. Goblins don't stand for it." Philosopher's Stone. At the time, Harry thought little of it, dazzled by the glitter of coins and treasure. Yet those words hinted at something darker, an invisible law that ensured no wizard could ever bend the bank to their will. This restriction explained why brute force was useless. Voldemort, for all his power, never stormed Gringotts. He entrusted Bellatrix Lestrange with a Horcrux hidden in her vault, but he himself never tried to break the bank with magic. He knew what others had discovered too late, that curses fizzled into nothingness and charms recoiled like snakes. Hermione once whispered that Gringotts is the closest thing wizards have to Azkaban for gold, and in its way, she was right. The effect was psychological as much as magical. Wizards who stepped inside felt their wands heavy, their confidence muted. In a world where magic was everything, Gringotts demanded obedience by stripping it away. That was its greatest weapon, not the dragons, not the goblin guards, but the certainty that the moment you drew your wand you had already lost. Number 11. The greatest heist in history. Gringotts was said to be unbreakable, yet history proved otherwise. The most famous breach came in the Deathly Hallows when Harry, Ron, and Hermione entered the Lestrange vault. Disguised under Polyjuice Potion and guided by Griphook, they defied every layer of security. The multiplying treasures nearly buried them alive. The goblins sounded alarms, and yet they escaped, on the back of the half-blind dragon that guarded the depths. Hermione's voice echoed through the chaos. "This is madness!" as they clung to the creature's scales, Deathly Hallows. For the first time in centuries, Gringotts looked vulnerable. But Harry was not the first thief. Centuries before, in the 17th century, rumours spoke of a coven of dark wizards who attempted to rob the bank. Their target was said to be an artifact older than the ministry itself, an object wrapped in black iron and sealed with runes. Few records survived, for goblins burned most evidence. Yet one line from a surviving ministry report whispered of a beast unleashed beneath London, fire and chains driving back the thieves. Many took this to mean a dragon had been awakened to defend the vaults. Goblins never confirmed the tale, but their silence was more telling than denial. Bill Weasley once remarked that Gringotts' history was stained with failed attempts and blood, though he would not name the culprits. Goblet of Fire. To him the dragon was no myth, it was tradition, a reminder that thieves were punished not just with capture, but with flames and death in the shadows of the underground. That is why Harry's escape was such a wound to goblin pride. The boy who lived had not only stolen from their most sacred vault, but also freed the beast meant to defend it. Wizards cheered his triumph, but to goblins it was humiliation. They had built their legend on the idea that no wizard could break them. And yet, from the 17th century raid to Harry's desperate flight, history showed that even the strongest fortress could burn. Number 12. Goblins and their special view on money. To understand Gringotts, one must first understand goblins. They never believed in simple ownership. To them, the maker of an object holds eternal claim, no matter who pays for it. A sword, a cup, even a pile of gold, all remained in their eyes goblin property. This belief shaped every policy of the bank. It was not just about guarding treasure, but about guarding honor. The clearest example came with the sword of Gryffindor. When Harry and Hermione sought Griphook's help in Deathly Hallows, the goblin made his stance plain. "That sword is goblin-made. It belongs with the goblins." His words were sharp, almost accusing, even though the sword had rested in Hogwarts for centuries. To Griphook, the transaction of ownership never ended. The sword was forged by goblin hands, and that alone decided its fate. This deep suspicion explained why goblins never allowed wizards to hold positions of power in Gringotts. Even Bill Weasley, who worked with them as a curse-breaker, admitted their distrust. He once told Harry that goblins viewed wizarding ownership as a temporary illusion. In their culture, possession was not the same as belonging. It was a fragile arrangement, ready to break the moment wizards forgot who had crafted the treasures they hoarded. Gringotts was more than a bank. It was a fortress where goblins defended not only gold, but their philosophy. Every vault door, every curse on the treasures inside, carried the weight of that worldview. Wizards saw keys and contracts. Goblins saw a chain of loyalty stretching back to the forge. And if a wizard dared to challenge that belief, the goblins would remind him, quietly and fiercely, that nothing made by their kind was ever truly his. Number 13. The Legend of the Indestructible Vault. Whispers in wizarding taverns spoke of a vault deeper than any Harry had seen. A vault that no goblin dared to name. Keys bent in its lock, spells fizzled into nothing, and even a dragon's roar would be useless before its door. This was not an ordinary defense. It was said to be built with magic older than Gringotts itself, runes carved before even Hogwarts was founded. Some believed the goblins had lost the knowledge to recreate such power, and that only this single vault remained as a relic of that forgotten art. Theories about its contents spread like fire. Many pointed to the founders of Hogwarts. What if Godric Gryffindor's enchanted blade had a twin, or if Rowena Ravenclaw entrusted her lost works to the goblins? Dumbledore himself, in Philosopher's Stone, reminded Harry of the dangers hidden in Gringotts, warning him, "Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except perhaps Hogwarts." His words carried weight. If even he deferred to the bank's secrecy, then what lay behind that unbreakable vault must have been beyond imagination. There were tales linking the vault to the Second Wizarding War. Some whispered that Voldemort sought knowledge of its existence, believing a weapon stronger than the Elder Wand might be hidden there. But even he, who bent Horcruxes to his will and split his soul into fragments, never touched it. Hermione later remarked, "If there had been such a vault, he would have wanted it. He always wanted what he couldn't have. Deathly Hallows." The absence of his name in these stories only made the vault more chilling. Perhaps the most unsettling idea was that the vault held nothing of value at all. Instead, it might have been designed to contain, not to preserve. a prison for some dark magic, too dangerous to destroy, sealed in the roots of London itself. Wizards imagined cursed relics, fragments of spells or worse, something alive, waiting. And in those hushed corridors guarded by stone and fire, the legend of the indestructible vault grew, untouched and unbroken, as if it were part of the earth itself. Number 14. Flaming charms in the corridors. The goblins of Gringotts never relied on brute force alone. They wove fire into the very stone of their underground halls. It was not ordinary fire, but sudden bursts of magical flame that appeared from nowhere. A thief might take a single wrong step, and the corridor itself would ignite. No bucket of water, no simple spell could smother it. The fire lived as part of the bank, feeding on trespassers' fear. One example lingers in goblin memory. In the 17th century, a wizard named Corvinus Stark tried to sneak into a vault by disguising himself with a glamour charm. The enchantment fooled the guards for a moment, but the walls of the corridor betrayed him. Flames roared up around him without warning, his screams echoed through the marble halls, and the illusion shattered. The goblins let the fire do its work, and Corvinus was dragged away half-burned, a lesson to others who thought they could cheat the bank. Even in Harry's time, the threat of such magic was real. Rowling reminds us how dangerous Gringotts was, writing in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Anyone who tried to rob Gringotts would be in for a nasty shock. Hagrid's warning to Harry was not an exaggeration. Behind those polished counters and glittering chandeliers lurked a defence far older than modern auras could handle. The goblins had long ago decided that the best deterrent was terror itself. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione entered the Lestrange vault, their greatest challenge was the multiplying treasure and the chained dragon. Yet many whisper that if their plan had faltered by a single step, the corridors themselves would have turned to fire. The trio escaped with luck, but others had not. Gringotts remains less a bank and more a living fortress, with its flames waiting patiently for the next intruder. Number 15, Cursed Keys. Gringotts has always stood as more than just a bank. To most wizards, it is the safest place in the magical world. The towering white marble building on Diagon Alley, with goblins who watch everything with eyes sharper than any dragons. Yet few ever wonder what lies behind the glittering counters and the endless labyrinth of underground vaults. The common wizard knows about dragons guarding the deepest vaults, about carts that speed along twisting tracks, and about enchantments that can burn trespassers alive. But hidden among these protective measures is a secret almost never spoken aloud. Some vaults are sealed not just by locks, but by cursed keys, keys that do not forgive mistakes. Goblins designed them as a test of ownership, and in their cold logic, a thief deserves not merely to be stopped, but to be punished forever. The cursed key is outwardly indistinguishable from any other, which is precisely the point. A wizard might hold one and feel only its metallic weight, perhaps notice the strange texture of the metal, but nothing betrays the danger within. These keys are forged from alloys known only to goblins, smelted in underground furnaces that no wizard has ever seen. In their hands, steel and silver are bound with runes so old that they predate Hogwarts itself. The result is a key that recognizes its master, tethered by blood, magic, or a bond deeper than either. To touch such a key without that bond is to invite destruction. Some victims were said to have vanished into smoke the instant they pressed one into a vault's lock, their last scream echoing down the marble halls. Goblins never intervened, for to them the punishment was not cruelty but justice. One recorded example from the 19th century still circulates in hushed stories among Gringotts staff. A wizard named Cassius Burke, from the infamous Burke family that later co-founded Borgin and Burke's, once tried to access a vault that was not his. He had bribed a lesser goblin for information, stolen a key, and descended into the tunnels. Witnesses say he was certain of his success. After all, the Burkes had a reputation for trafficking in cursed objects, and Cassius considered himself an expert in dark magic. Yet when he pressed the small blackened key into the vault door, his hands locked in place, his veins turned silver, and within seconds he collapsed, lifeless. The goblins did not even feign surprise. They recorded the incident as a violation met with due consequence and refused to release the body to his family. It was never buried, for the goblins claimed it belonged to the vault itself now. Why would goblins create such fearsome safeguards when simpler charms might have sufficed? The answer lies in their relationship with wizards. Goblins have never fully trusted the people who deposit gold into their care. Centuries of exploitation taught them that wizards crave control over goblin craftsmanship, especially when it comes to objects of power. By forging cursed keys, goblins ensured a measure of autonomy. Wizards might rent the vaults, they might claim ownership of the gold inside, but the goblins controlled the very entrance. A wizard could never replicate these keys because the alloy resisted human spellwork, twisting and corroding under wand-forged enchantments. As a goblin once told a ministry official, the key knows its maker and it knows its master. It knows when it is betrayed. When Harry Potter first visited Gringotts in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the scene seemed innocent, even comical. Hagrid handed over the small key to Harry's vault, and the goblin Griphook examined it before allowing them entry. Rowling wrote, Griphook held the key up to the light, examined it carefully and said, "That seems in order." Most readers skim over this, imagining it as a simple bureaucratic step. But in light of the cursed keys, that moment carries another weight. The goblin was not merely checking for authenticity. He was ensuring that the boy who stood before him was truly connected to the vault, that the ancient enchantments would not lash out. Harry, of course, was safe, for the vault had been left to him legitimately by his parents. Yet one wonders what would have happened if the key had passed into another's hands before that day. The Vault of the Philosopher's Stone offers an even sharper example. When Dumbledore arranged for the stone's protection, the small, grubby package was hidden in Vault 713. Hagrid carried the key that day, but one cannot ignore the possibility that this, too, was a cursed key. No wizard could have stolen it from Hagrid's pocket without paying a price. The goblins would have been delighted to allow such a thief to try, for the bank's reputation rested not only on impenetrable locks but on deterrence. A thief who dies instantly becomes the strongest warning to others. It is perhaps telling that even Voldemort, through Quirrell, attempted to bypass Gringotts not by force but by subterfuge, relying on timing rather than daring to steal a key outright. The notion of cursed keys also explains the goblins' perpetual smirks when dealing with wizards. Rowling describes their manner as sly, watchful, and faintly mocking. They know secrets that the average witch or wizard refuses to acknowledge. Wizards believe their wands and spells make them masters of magic, yet goblins smile because a simple piece of metal in their possession can undo any arrogance. That irony is part of Gringotts' power. It is not a fortress because of dragons or stone walls alone, but because the very tools required for entry are dangerous to the unworthy. Number 16, The Secret Archive of Debts. Few wizards ever stop to think what lies in the deepest vaults of Gringotts. Everyone knows the bank is famous for its dragons, its enchanted carts, and the impressive marble hall where goblins count endless piles of galleons. Yet beneath the gold, beneath the glittering jewels, there is something more sinister, a secret archive of debts, sealed within enchanted scrolls that record every promise, every unpaid loan, every bargain made with goblins. This archive is said to stretch through entire underground corridors, guarded as jealously as the vaults themselves. To open one of these scrolls is to touch a living history of wizarding obligations that cannot be erased. Unlike coins, which can be spent and replaced, these debts live on, etched not just in parchment, but in bloodlines. The goblins of Gringotts claim that no spell, no charm, no fire can destroy them. The principle is cruelly simple. A wizard or witch who borrows from the goblins signs more than just a document. They enter into a magical binding that fuses their name with the debt. If they die without repaying, the enchantment does not end. It snakes down the family line, attaching itself to children, grandchildren, and beyond until the balance is cleared. This explains why certain old families whisper warnings about Gringotts loans as if they were curses. The Malfoys, for instance, with their immense fortune, never once risked a goblin loan, for they knew that arrogance alone could not break such bindings. The Weasleys, too, though often short on money, preferred to live humbly rather than bargain. With goblins. Arthur Weasley once remarked in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, "Never trust a thing if you can't see where it keeps its brain." That suspicion of magical objects extended in quiet circles to goblin contracts themselves. What makes these debts even more chilling is their invisibility in daily wizarding life. No family is forced to carry a sign of their obligation, no scarlet letter glows on their robes. But the goblins know. Every time a vault is accessed, they cross-reference the archive, checking whether obligations remain. There are whispers that some wizards were denied access to their own fortunes until a centuries-old debt was settled first. Imagine discovering that the pile of gold your ancestor left you was already claimed by a contract signed. Generations earlier, the vault may be filled with riches, but you might not touch a single galleon until the goblins are satisfied. One famous example buried deep in Gringotts records is the tale of Crispin Muldoon, a wizard from the late 1800s. Muldoon was a brilliant but reckless potioneer who borrowed heavily from the bank to fund his experiments. The potions he promised to sell never met expectations, and when he died in a brewing accident, his children found themselves shackled by his unpaid balance. For 3 generations, the Muldoons were denied access to their vault. Only in the 1940s did a distant grandson, Fergus Muldoon, manage to repay the final sum after marrying into a wealthy family. It was said the goblins handed him a scroll that burst into flames the moment the balance was cleared, the debt's enchantment finally ending. The Muldoons learned a brutal lesson. When you sign with goblins, you sign with your bloodline. There are those who argue that such practices are unfair, a way for goblins to enslave wizarding families with eternal obligations. But the goblins see it differently. In their culture, a promise is sacred, and to break it is not only dishonorable, but a crime that poisons lineage. Wizards, they argue, live short lives and are prone to arrogance. Goblins, with their longer memories and precise records, ensure continuity. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Griphook's bitter words to Harry resonate. The goblins' trust has been abused by wizards. They have been cheated and robbed and slaughtered. The archive of debts is, in many ways, the goblins' answer to centuries of broken wizarding promises, a system impossible to deceive. For Hogwarts students studying history of magic, this subject never appears in Professor Binns's dull lectures. Yet in the shadows of the library, obscure texts speak of these debt scrolls as cursed parchments, glowing with runes no wizard can translate. Albus Dumbledore, who always had a deep understanding of goblin grievances, once alluded to the lasting memory of debts unpaid when discussing wizard-goblin relations. It is likely that even he knew of the archive, though whether he ever saw it is uncertain. His caution when dealing with goblins suggests that he respected their laws more than most wizards dared to. The secrecy surrounding the archive has led to wild theories. Some believe that Voldemort himself, in his rise to power, sought access to the debt records. What better way to control wizarding families than to threaten them with the exposure of their ancient obligations? If true, it could explain why certain families, who might otherwise have resisted him, bent to his will. Whether he succeeded is unknown, but Gringotts remained one of the few institutions he never fully controlled. The goblins' neutrality, or perhaps their stubborn independence, shielded the archive even during the darkest days of the Second Wizarding War. There are even darker rumors that the scrolls are alive, whispering the names of debtors in the silence of Gringotts' deepest halls. A few reckless curse breakers have claimed that they once heard echoes of wizarding names repeated endlessly in guttural goblin tongue, as if the parchments themselves demanded repayment. Bill Weasley, who spent years working for Gringotts, never confirmed such tales, but he never dismissed them either. He admitted once to Harry that goblin enchantments go far deeper than wizards imagine, and that many vaults conceal not just treasures, but obligations. If debts can speak, then the archive is not merely a record, but a haunting presence that ensures justice for goblins, punishment for debtors. Number 17, dragons are not the only guards. The vast marble hall of Gringotts, with its high counters and suspicious goblin clerks, has always concealed more than it revealed. Readers often remember the thunderous roar of the Ukrainian iron belly chained deep within the Lestrange vault, but dragons are only the most visible part of the story. Beneath London's cobbled streets lie twisting caverns, blackened tunnels, and echoing chambers where shadows stretch unnaturally long. Wizards and witches rarely think about what lies beyond the vaults, yet goblins have whispered for centuries of other guardians hidden from human eyes. Tales of stone creatures, enchanted monstrosities, and even living darkness itself circulate like ghostly rumours in Nocturne Alley. What Harry and his friends saw in Deathly Hallows was terrifying, but it might only be one chapter of Gringotts' layered mythology. The dragon that Harry, Ron and Hermione encountered in 1998 was no secret to the goblins. It was a brute beast, blinded and scarred, conditioned by cruel bursts of pain whenever it dared to resist. When Hermione cried, "Harry, it's been trained to expect pain when it hears a noise," readers glimpsed not only the cruelty of goblins, but also their ruthless efficiency. Yet goblin records hint at far older experiments, guardians that predated the dragon's service. In ancient ledgers written in the black iron script of Ragnarok I, references appear to the Watchers of the Deep and the Silent Sentinels. What exactly these terms meant has never been fully explained, but fragments survive in goblin folklore that speak of living rock fashioned into hulking forms. The notion of stone guardians is not without precedent in wizarding history. In the Department of Mysteries, enchanted statues once came alive to protect the minister from curses. Dumbledore himself animated the statues of the Fountain of Magical Brethren to defend against Voldemort in the Atrium Duel of 1996. If wizards could create guardians from stone, surely goblins, with their mastery of metals and subterranean magics, could bind similar constructs. According to a forgotten account preserved by the eccentric collector Urquhart Macmillan, a junior cursebreaker named Hector Fawley once reported seeing something vast, faceless, and granite-skinned moving in the depths. Beyond vault number 687. His report was dismissed as drunken rambling, but Fawley never returned to Gringotts. His family whispered that the goblins silenced him. Another tale lingers around the subject of trolls. It is well known that mountain trolls can be subdued with sufficient magic. Professor Quirrell infamously smuggled one into Hogwarts during Harry's first year. Yet there are hints that goblins employ an even darker method. A passage in Bathilda Bagshot's rarely read manuscript Goblin Wars Uncensored claims that after their defeat at the Battle of Eastmoor, a clan of trolls was magically bound to Gringotts' service. Bagshot wrote, "The goblins chained their will with a net of charms, leaving them husks that obeyed only the language of their captors." Those scholars dismissed this as exaggeration. The imagery of lumbering shapes hidden in the shadows of vault corridors remains a persistent feature of wizarding rumour. Perhaps the most unsettling stories, however, concern the shadows themselves. While the dragon and trolls are physical, flesh or stone, the legends of the shadows describe something incorporeal, predatory, and intelligent. These are not ordinary darknesses cast by torchlight, but living silhouettes, entities that cling to walls and ceilings. According to whispered accounts among older curse-breakers, if one strays too far into the labyrinth, the shadows detach from their anchors and stalk intruders silently. The terrifying element of this myth is that no one who has allegedly encountered them has returned alive. Goblins never deny these tales outright. Instead, they sneer, muttering, "Some vaults are meant never to be opened." There is one particular story that lends the shadows more weight than a simple myth. In 1873, a celebrated treasure hunter named Silas Ketteridge, famous for unearthing cursed tombs in Egypt, boasted in the leaky cauldron that he would plunder the deepest vaults of Gringotts. His companions reported he secured passage into the bank under the guise of an inspection. He vanished without a trace. Only his wand was later discovered splintered and drained of magic, abandoned on the cold stone steps near a vault door. A goblin overseer supposedly remarked, "The dark claimed him," before ordering silence. Ketteridge's disappearance was never solved, and his name remains an eerie footnote in wizarding legend. When Harry, Ron and Hermione fled the Lestrange vault on Dragonback, they had no way of knowing how close they came to these other mysteries. Their desperate escape drew the eyes of every goblin, yet none pursued them into the skies above London. Some suggest the goblins were not merely shocked at the theft, but relieved that the intruders had not wandered deeper. It raises the unsettling question, if the dragon was merely one layer of protection, what would have awaited them further down the tunnels? Ron once muttered afterward that the entire experience felt like being trapped in someone else's nightmare, and in many ways he was correct. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid warned Harry, "You'd be mad to try and rob it." At the time, it seemed a straightforward comment about goblin vigilance. With hindsight, it becomes clear that Hagrid, a creature lover who had worked with many beings, might have heard more than he admitted. As gamekeeper, he certainly knew of trolls, giants, and enchanted beasts. Was his warning rooted not only in the goblin's reputation but in knowledge of darker guardians whispered about in taverns frequented by gamekeepers and trappers? The possibility makes his words heavier than they first appeared. Number 18. Vaults that change their shape. Deep beneath the bustling streets of Diagon Alley lies Gringotts Wizarding Bank, a place that J.K. Rowling described in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone with an air of both reverence and dread. The white marble building above the ground gives no hint of the labyrinth that sprawls endlessly below. In those caverns, far deeper than most wizards would ever dare to venture, there exist vaults touched by an ancient magic so intricate and so unsettling that even their owners could not fully claim mastery over them. These are the vaults that shift, twist, and change form as though alive, obeying only the goblin's will or perhaps a spell etched into their walls centuries ago. The goblins, with their precise and jealous craftsmanship, were never careless in guarding treasure. When Hagrid told Harry in the first book, "Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything ye want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts," it was not an exaggeration. That safety was not only due to dragons and underground tracks, but also to enchantments woven so tightly into the structure of the vaults that thieves would be hopelessly lost. In the case of the shape-shifting vaults, even legitimate owners sometimes found themselves bewildered. Imagine placing a chest of gold in the corner one week only to return the next and discover that the corner itself no longer existed, replaced by an arched passage spiraling into a shadowy corridor. One recorded example speaks to the disorientation these vaults could cause. A wizard named Crispin Role, a distant cousin of the infamous Death Eater Thorfinn Role, was said to have inherited a fortune locked in one of the deeper vaults. Crispin reportedly entered the vault with the intention of retrieving a small casket of enchanted opals. What awaited him was a maze of corridors that shifted like smoke. He searched for hours, growing more frantic as the walls stretched and folded in upon themselves. When he finally stumbled out, his beard was streaked with white, and he was empty-handed. The goblins calmly informed him that he had merely been inside for 20 minutes. To Crispin, it had felt like an eternity. The idea that a vault could change its plan was not a trick designed only for mischief. The goblins viewed it as essential. Treasure in their eyes was never truly safe unless it eluded memory itself. The enchantments were woven so that no wizard or witch could create a reliable mental map of their own storage. The piles of galleons might slide across the floor like waves, great pillars of silver might sink into the ground, and the very ceiling might lower until one felt trapped in a cavern barely tall enough to stand. By erasing certainty, the goblins ensured absolute protection. Even if an intruder overcame dragons, hexes, and the multiplying charms on objects like those Harry and his friends faced in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, the constantly shifting nature of the chamber itself would undo them. This characteristic of Gringotts' vaults calls to mind a chilling detail from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke into Bellatrix's vault, Rowling described how the treasure had multiplied by the minute until it nearly crushed them. But imagine another layer of difficulty. What if the walls themselves had folded and sealed passages behind them, locking intruders in a maze of their own making? It is not far-fetched to believe that Bellatrix's vault contained at least a trace of this goblin enchantment. After all, she was a... Lestrange and her family had dealings with the oldest goblin smiths. The goblins never spoke openly of how they cast such magic. Some scholars believe that they inscribed runes into the rock at the very foundation of Gringotts, runes so ancient that they could manipulate stone as if it were liquid. Others whispered of a goblin artifact lost in the Middle Ages, a hammer that could bend metal and earth alike into flowing shapes. Whatever the truth, the effect was clear. A wizard might leave a vault knowing that a staircase curled to the left, only to find on return that the same staircase now rose in a dizzying spiral to the right. Time itself seemed to warp inside these chambers, making the search for one's possessions an act of faith as much as memory. Another fascinating story is linked to the Black family. Arcturus Black, a man obsessed with the purity of his lineage, was said to have hidden a set of enchanted family rings deep in his Gringotts vault. He visited only once, accompanied by a goblin named Ragnok, and emerged furious, claiming that the vault had stolen from him. In reality, the shifting design had simply hidden the rings behind a newly formed wall. When he returned months later, he found them stacked neatly atop a pedestal that had not existed before. The vault, in its own way, had chosen when he was worthy of retrieving his treasures. To step inside such a vault required not only bravery, but also humility before goblin magic. Wizards often prided themselves on control, yet here was a realm where control slipped away like sand through fingers. A reminder echoed in every shifting wall. This was not wizard-made magic, and therefore not subject to wizard mastery. It belonged to the goblins, who saw in the fluid design a kind of poetic justice. Wealth could be guarded not by locking it in a fixed place, but by making that place unknowable. It is worth considering how the enchantments shaped the psychology of those who used them. Owners of these vaults often spoke of feeling haunted by their own fortune. Some admitted to nightmares of wandering endless stone corridors, pursued by the clinking echo of their own coins. Others confessed that retrieving items felt like negotiating with a living being. One might bow or speak aloud to the vault itself, as if begging it to release its grip. Whether this was mere superstition or a genuine effect of the goblin magic is unknown, but the emotional toll was undeniable. Even Albus Dumbledore once hinted at the peculiarities of Gringotts' vaults. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he remarked cryptically to Harry about the strange and ancient magic protecting certain treasures. Though he never elaborated, one can imagine he referred to these very enchantments. If Dumbledore himself, a wizard of nearly unmatched skill, approached such vaults with respect, then ordinary witches and wizards could only marvel at the scale of goblin craft. Another layer of intrigue comes from how the goblins themselves interacted with these shifting vaults. While witches and wizards often felt lost, goblins seemed to navigate them with uncanny ease. Some believed that goblins shared a collective understanding of the enchantments, almost as if the bank itself whispered to them. Visitors would note how a goblin could stride confidently through a twisting passage that had left a wizard bewildered only moments earlier. It reinforced the unsettling idea that the vaults were not only guarded by goblins, but fundamentally belonged to them, regardless of wizard ownership. It is tempting to compare these vaults to living creatures. Their transformations resembled breathing, walls expanding, floors contracting, pillars rising like bones shifting beneath flesh. To some observers, the vaults seemed almost sentient. They responded to intruders with hostility, but sometimes greeted rightful owners with an eerie calm. This notion was so pervasive that a saying developed among wizards: "Gold at Gringotts sleeps like a dragon, and the vault is its heart." To awaken it wrongly was to invite disaster. The implications of such magic extend beyond banking. They remind us that the wizarding world was not built on wizardry alone. Goblins, centaurs, and other magical beings each contributed to a hidden foundation that wizards often overlooked. The shifting vaults stand as a permanent testament to goblin skill, a reminder that the treasures of wizards could be kept only because of non-wizard enchantments. It challenges the idea of wizard supremacy, showing that even the most powerful witches and wizards were humbled in the face of goblin magic. Looking back at the daring break-in by Harry, Hermione, and Ron, one cannot help but wonder how much more impossible their task might have been had the vault of Bellatrix Lestrange fully unleashed its shape-shifting enchantments. Their polyjuice disguises and clever spells would have faltered against walls that folded like origami. Perhaps they succeeded only because the vault allowed them to. Perhaps in some strange twist of fate, the goblin magic that day chose to guide them rather than destroy them. That thought lingers like a shadow over the story, that Gringotts itself is not merely a bank, but a labyrinth of living stone, older and wiser than any wizard's spellbook. Thus, in the depths of Gringotts, treasure lies not only in the heaps of gold and jewels, but in the very walls that guard them. The shape-shifting vaults are more than containers. They are guardians in their own right, unpredictable and eternal. To enter them is to step into the mind of goblins, a world where wealth is never static, safety is found in uncertainty, and even the rightful owner must surrender control. This mystery remains one of the most fascinating and most terrifying truths about the Wizarding Bank. Number 19, Alchemical Treasures. Of all the mysteries surrounding Gringotts' Wizarding Bank, few are as compelling as the whispers about its alchemical treasures. Beyond the dragon-guarded vaults and enchanted locks, there are tales of metals that bend the rules of nature itself. These legends claim that Nicolas Flamel, the famed alchemist who created the Philosopher's Stone, entrusted the goblins with materials that had been refined and transmuted during his centuries of research. Such metals were said to shine within a light, resist any attempt at destruction, and in some cases even radiate magical properties that no wizard of the modern age could hope to replicate. It is no coincidence, many say, that Gringotts was targeted during moments of great unrest, for the vaults may hold not only gold, but the secrets of eternal creation. The figure of Nicolas Flamel has always loomed over wizarding history as more than just an eccentric scholar. His friendship with Albus Dumbledore and his legendary discovery of the Philosopher's Stone mark him as a symbol of wisdom and restraint. Yet, for every account of his generosity, there are darker rumours. Flamel was said to have worked with substances rarer than unicorn blood, metals that glowed faintly even in the absence of light. Some of his followers, inspired by his longevity, collected fragments of quicksilver, moonstone, and even dust said to be gathered from a fallen star. The question remains, what happened to these materials once Flamel and his wife chose to end their lives? If not destroyed, they may have been entrusted to the goblins of Gringotts, beings known for their unmatched skill in crafting with enchanted metals. The notion that goblins would guard such a treasure is not far-fetched. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid warns Harry about the dangers of attempting to break into Gringotts. If anyone tried to rob Gringotts, they'd be dragged down by goblins and never seen again. This level of protection seems excessive if the bank merely held piles of wizarding gold. After all, ordinary treasure could be hidden anywhere. The true importance of Gringotts lies in the possibility that it safeguards materials essential to magical history, including the remnants of Flamel's alchemical experiments. These were not items one could leave unguarded in a manor or castle. Their power demanded the iron secrecy of goblin magic. An example often cited is the vaults deep below the bank that Harry, Ron, and Hermione encountered during their break-in to retrieve Helga Hufflepuff's cup. The vault of Bellatrix Lestrange was cursed with Gemino and Flagrante charms, multiplying objects endlessly and burning the thieves. This defense raises a simple question. Why guard ordinary heirlooms with magic of such complexity? Many believe that hidden among the treasures of wealthy families are deposits of alchemical metals so rare that their protection required not only goblin sorcery, but also enchantments devised by ancient alchemists themselves. The Lestrange Vault may have concealed more than Voldemort's Horcrux. It may have held pieces of a legacy too valuable to name. One particular material frequently mentioned in rumour is orichalcum, a fabled red-gold metal that was said to resonate with magical energy. Some accounts claim Flamel perfected a method of stabilizing this volatile substance. It was rumored that a single ingot of orichalcum could amplify spellcasting to dangerous levels, turning a simple charm into a destructive force. While no wizard in modern times has seen orichalcum, whispers suggest that Gringotts stores a cache of it in a vault whose location is known only to the Goblin King himself. The secrecy surrounding these materials would explain the goblins' ferocity when dealing with wizards who questioned their rights to the objects forged under their care. The connection between alchemy and Gringotts becomes even more intriguing when considering the goblins' perspective on ownership. Goblins have long argued that an object crafted by them remains theirs, even when purchased by a wizard. If Flamel entrusted his alchemical metals to Gringotts, the goblins may have believed they were custodians, not mere bankers. This would place them in a position of immense power, able to withhold or reveal materials that could alter the course of magical history. The tension between goblin rights and wizarding authority, which surfaces repeatedly throughout the Harry Potter series, may well have been inflamed by the existence of these hidden deposits. The darker side of this mystery lies in the interest shown by dark wizards. Voldemort himself, obsessed with immortality, would have had every reason to covet such materials. The Philosopher's Stone was destroyed, but if metals linked to its creation remained locked in Gringotts, Voldemort's fascination with the bank makes perfect sense. The attack on Gringotts in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where Harry and his friends escape on the back of a dragon, may have masked a larger intent, Voldemort's search for alchemical relics that could extend his power beyond Horcruxes. His rage upon learning that one Horcrux had been stolen hints that he feared losing more than just a piece of his soul. Perhaps he feared that Harry might stumble upon the alchemical legacy he had long sought. The very design of Gringotts also reflects this possibility. The deeper one travels, the more perilous the environment becomes, with carts rattling along tracks that lead past waterfalls known to wash away enchantments. Such defences suggest that Gringotts was never merely about financial wealth. It was a fortress designed to contain things that could not be permitted to fall into careless hands. The goblins' alliance with wizards may have been less about service and more about maintaining control over deposits too powerful for even the Ministry of Magic to regulate. The alchemical hoards, if they exist, would explain why Gringotts holds such an unassailable reputation. One could argue that this legend is nothing more than myth, yet even myths hold traces of truth. When Harry first sees the tiny vault of the Philosopher's Stone hidden away under the care of Gringotts, he is struck by the goblin's secrecy. Hagrid's words echo through the moment. There's no safer place except perhaps Hogwarts. That comparison is telling. Only Hogwarts, with its layers of protective enchantments, could rival Gringotts in guarding something of extraordinary value. If the stone was once stored there, why not also the rare metals that made its creation possible? It would be logical for Flamel to ensure his life's work remained hidden, not destroyed. The tales of alchemical caches also find support in minor details scattered across wizarding history. In the archives of Beauxbatons Academy, there are mentions of Flamel sending sealed caskets across Europe, each containing samples of substances he had stabilized through alchemical transmutation. Some reached England, where records vanish after their arrival. The natural assumption is that the caskets ended up in Gringotts, where their contents remain untouched. If this is true, then beneath London's cobbled streets lies not only wizarding gold, but the last fragments of experiments that defined the boundary between life and death. It is no wonder that dark wizards, from Grindelwald to Voldemort, showed an uncanny interest in Gringotts. Grindelwald's philosophy of harnessing magic for dominance would have aligned perfectly with the use of alchemical metals. Though no record exists of him breaching the bank, rumors persist that he attempted to negotiate with the goblins, offering them influence in a new order in exchange for access to hidden vaults. The goblins, ever proud, refused, but this refusal only underscores the value of what lies below. No dark wizard seeks empty treasure, they seek power crystallized in material form. The persistence of these rumors suggests that the alchemical caches are more than legend. Even modern goblins, when asked about their history, bristle at the mention of Flamel's name. Their evasions, their insistence on secrecy, only feed the belief that something lies beneath the bank more dangerous than any dragon. The idea that the last remnants of the world's greatest alchemist are locked away has inspired generations of treasure hunters, though none have returned. If true, the goblin's silence is not only about protecting wealth, but about shielding humanity from temptations it cannot handle. What makes these legends so captivating is not only the thought of glittering ingots and radiant stones, but the moral dilemma they present. Flamel himself chose to end his life, destroying the Philosopher's Stone with Dumbledore's guidance, because, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. Yet if his alchemical metals still exist, they contradict his final decision. Did he leave behind the means to recreate his greatest work? Or are the metals inert fragments of a bygone era? Either way, their existence would pose a question to every wizard, should such power ever be touched again. For the modern reader, the fascination lies in the possibility that beneath Gringotts is a story unfinished. Goblins guard their secrets, wizards spin their theories, and dark forces still linger in whispers of vaults unopened. The alchemical hoards may never be revealed, but their legend casts a shadow over the glittering marble halls of the bank. Gringotts is more than a vault of wealth. It is a vault of memory, a place where the legacy of Nicolas Flamel may sleep, waiting for the day when the curious or the reckless decide to awaken it. Number 20, Marble with a Secret. Of all the mysteries surrounding the wizarding world, few are as captivating as the hidden defences of Gringotts, the wizarding bank that towers in the heart of Diagon Alley. The gleaming facade of Gringotts is carved from white marble, and at first glance it appears purely ornamental, a grand architectural choice meant to intimidate and impress. Yet behind its shining surface lies a secret that has been whispered about for generations among goblins and wizards alike. That marble is not ordinary stone, but a magical barrier so powerful that it is said to repel the darkest enchantments known to wizardkind. Visitors entering the bank seldom notice, for their eyes are drawn to the stern goblins at the counters or the dragon-guarded vaults deep below, but the truth stands quietly in the open, protecting the bank from dangers most wizards would never dare imagine. The marble itself has an eerie quality. When sunlight strikes it at an angle, it does not merely shine, it seems to shimmer faintly as if some enchantment hums beneath the polished surface. Many have walked past Gringotts and felt a faint unease, an invisible pressure that dissuades them from even entertaining thoughts of mischief. Scholars of magical architecture have long debated whether the marble was mined in its natural form or altered through goblin sorcery. The goblins of Gringotts, secretive as ever, refuse to discuss it. As one wizard once muttered in hushed tones, Try asking a goblin how their magic works, and you'll leave with fewer answers than you had before. The secrecy has only deepened the fascination around this stone that seems alive with power. Legends trace the marble back to an obscure quarry in the Scottish Highlands where, according to rumour, the stone resonated naturally with protective enchantments. Goblin smiths, known for their uncanny ability to bind metal and stone with permanent charms, supposedly recognized its unique properties centuries ago. It is said that when Gringotts the Goblin founded the bank in 1474, he insisted that the entrance hall be built entirely from this enchanted marble. The reason was simple: he knew human wizards well enough to distrust them, and he demanded guarantee that no curse could breach the walls from outside. By embedding protective magic in the very architecture, the goblins created a fortress whose defenses required no constant upkeep, a passive shield that stood as vigilant as the goblins themselves. The true power of this marble reveals itself only in moments of hostility. When a dark wizard attempts to hurl curses at the facade, the spell is not merely absorbed, it rebounds upon the caster with multiplied intensity. It is a vicious kind of justice, one that ensures the attacker becomes victim to their own malice. Magical records preserved in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement mention an incident in 1724 when a band of dark wizards led by Emmerich the Evil's last followers tried to break into Gringotts. As the story goes, their curses shot back at them before the goblins had even drawn their blades, leaving the attackers incapacitated in the cobblestones outside the bank. The ministry kept the matter quiet to avoid encouraging others to test their luck, but the tale lingers as a chilling reminder of the marble's unforgiving defense. The enchantment is not merely defensive, but symbolic. In many ways, the marble of Gringotts reflects the philosophy of goblins. What you send out returns to you, often with greater force. This principle explains why, in wizarding history, no siege has ever succeeded against Gringotts. Even Lord Voldemort, in all his ruthless campaigns, never attempted to storm the bank directly. His methods relied instead on infiltration, persuasion, or theft by proxy. The goblins knew that no wizard, however powerful, would dare challenge the stone itself. The gleaming marble facade therefore served not only as a wall of protection, but also as a silent warning, an unspoken declaration that Gringotts was untouchable. J.K. Rowling's books themselves nod subtly to this defense, though never explicitly revealing the truth. When Harry Potter first enters Gringotts in Philosopher's Stone, the description is striking. A snowy white building that towered over the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was a goblin. The phrase snowy white is not accidental. It highlights the marble, gleaming with unnatural brilliance even under the grey skies of London. Later, when Hagrid explains the dangers of trying to rob Gringotts, he says firmly, "You'd be mad to try and rob it." Readers often assume he referred only to the dragons and labyrinthine vaults, but those who study the text see another layer. Hagrid, who had spent years in the magical community, would certainly have heard the rumours about the marble's curse-reflecting properties. Consider the infamous break-in of 1991 when Professor Quirrell, under Voldemort's influence, attempted to steal the Philosopher's Stone from Gringotts. The theft was not executed by storming the bank's walls, but by slipping through under disguise and trickery. The marble itself was never challenged. Voldemort, despite his arrogance, must have known that a frontal assault was futile. The enchanted facade made any direct attack suicidal, and Voldemort prided himself on cunning rather than recklessness. That alone stands as testament to the marble's deterrent power. If even the Dark Lord refrained from unleashing his might upon it, one can only imagine the devastation that would have been returned to him had he tried. The story takes a darker turn when examining the events of 1998 during the Second Wizarding War. Harry, Ron and Hermione infiltrated Gringotts to reach Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, and though their means of entry involved Polyjuice Potion, imperious curses, and eventually a blind flight on the back of a dragon, they too avoided confronting the marble defences. This was no coincidence. The trio knew from their own studies that any attack on the exterior of the bank would be a disaster by choosing to infiltrate from within. They bypassed the marble's enchantment entirely. The chaos that ensued inside only emphasized how invincible the outside truly was. Gringotts remained standing, gleaming white, as if mocking all efforts to undermine it. The symbolic resonance of this marble cannot be overstated. It stands as the embodiment of security, a promise to every wizard who deposits their fortune in the bank that their gold will be safe not merely from thieves but from the darkest powers of the age. In a world where trust is fragile and betrayal common, the shining walls offer an almost sacred reassurance. To wizards who walk past, the marble is not only stone, but a reminder that some places remain inviolable, even when chaos reigns elsewhere. One could say that the marble's greatest power is psychological, for it plants in every mind the certainty that Gringotts is beyond attack. Some historians argue that the marble's enchantment is older than Gringotts itself, perhaps predating goblin craftsmanship. They suggest that the quarry in the Highlands once held spiritual significance, and that ancient druids carved protective runes into the veins of the stone long before goblins discovered it. If this theory is true, then the goblins merely harnessed a magic that had lain dormant for centuries. This possibility adds yet another layer of mystery, for it would mean that the marble represents not just goblin sorcery, but a primal force of the British Isles, woven into the earth itself. One cannot ignore the human cost associated with such unyielding protection. While it deters dark wizards, it does so mercilessly without discretion. A misguided spell cast too close to the marble might rebound upon its caster with catastrophic results. Anecdotes tell of careless young wizards who, in drunken folly, attempted hexes on the facade and ended up hospitalized at St. Mungo's. The goblins, true to form, express little sympathy, declaring that fools earn their own fate. In this sense, the marble embodies the goblin view of justice, impartial, brutal, and final. The most fascinating element is the secrecy. The goblins never acknowledge the marble's enchantment directly, and no official record within the Ministry of Magic mentions it by name. This silence seems deliberate, as if both goblins and wizards prefer to let the truth circulate as rumor rather than documented fact. A deterrent, after all, works best when cloaked in mystery. Those who believe in the marble's curse-reflecting powers dare not test it, and those who dismiss it as legend risk discovering the truth the hard way. Silence, therefore, becomes the final layer of defense, ensuring that Gringotts' greatest protection is never fully understood or challenged. There is poetry in the thought that such an enormous institution rests upon something as seemingly simple as stone. Yet this marble, gleaming in the London sun, is no ordinary stone. It is a mirror of intent, punishing the wicked with their own malice and safeguarding wealth through a kind of karmic symmetry. Its smooth white surface reflects not only the city around it, but the fears of those who would dare oppose it. Each block, laid centuries ago, still hums with the will of goblins determined to protect what is theirs, and in that hum lies the promise that Gringotts will never fall to brute force. For Harry Potter, the marble facade was simply part of the scenery during his many encounters with Gringotts, but for those who look closer, it represents one of the most fascinating secrets in the wizarding world. The books may never dwell on it in detail, yet the hints are there for the observant reader. The descriptions of unnatural brilliance, the warnings that robbing Gringotts is madness, the fact that history records no successful attack. All of these details converge to form a truth both sobering and awe-inspiring. The white marble is more than architecture, it is enchantment carved into permanence, a shield that has guarded the wizarding economy for centuries without ever drawing a wand in its own defense. Number 21. Goblin script on the walls. Of all the mysterious places in the wizarding world, few hold the same aura of secrecy and power as Gringotts' Wizarding Bank. Its towering marble facade and echoing halls have long fascinated readers, but hidden within those details lies a peculiar element that many overlook. On the polished walls of the bank, behind the goblin tellers and along the vast corridors leading to the vaults, strange symbols can be seen faintly etched into the stone. These are not random carvings, they belong to an ancient system of goblin script, a written language older than Hogwarts itself, understood only by the goblins and carefully protected from the eyes of ordinary witches and wizards. To most visitors, they appear as decorative patterns or abstract designs. Yet for those who have studied the subject, these inscriptions suggest something far deeper, perhaps even fundamental, to the bank's very ability to guard its treasures. The first recorded description of such markings appears not in the official texts of the ministry, but in the notes of Bathilda Bagshot, the famed magical historian. She wrote that the goblins have always woven their will into stone, suggesting that goblin magic does not merely reside in wands or spoken incantations, but is physically bound to architecture and materials. When Harry Potter first entered Gringotts in Philosopher's Stone, the reader is struck by the grandeur of the place. About 100 goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins in brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. Rowling does not explicitly mention the script here, but careful observation of the descriptive passages reveals the sense of something carved, something enduring, a layer of history built into the very stone that surrounds the business of gold and wealth. Scholars who revisited the Gringotts scenes point to Deathly Hallows as offering the strongest clue. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione break into Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, they are met not only with the multiplying treasures and burning enchantments, but also with what one researcher, Professor Caradoc Weatherby of the Department of Magical Studies, described as the living script of goblins. According to Weatherby, faint glowing runes pulsed along the vault's inner arch as the trio entered. These were not described in detail by Rowling, but several fan accounts and analyses insist they were there, hidden within the chaos of the scene. If true, these runes would not have been decorative. They would have served as active enchantments, woven into the very defences that made Gringotts famous as the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except perhaps Hogwarts. Goblin script itself is a mystery. Unlike the elegant runes of Norse wizards or the sharp Gothic letters of medieval magical manuscripts, goblin writing is jagged, almost metallic in shape, reflecting the race's deep connection to forging and metalwork. The goblins see craftsmanship not only in swords like the legendary goblin-made blade, Gryffindor's sword, but also in language itself. Every symbol is said to be forged rather than written, carrying weight and permanence. It is little wonder, then, that when carved into marble or granite, the script resonates with magical energy, creating layers of unseen protection. One particularly striking example comes from the lower chambers of Gringotts, described fleetingly during the dragon escape in Deathly Hallows. As the blind, half-starved creature bursts through the tunnels, flames erupt across walls lined with iron rails and stone. Observers of that scene have pointed out that Harry noticed strange markings catching firelight as they passed. Many interpret these as goblin inscriptions, their sudden illumination triggered by the dragon's presence. If these marks were indeed part of the goblin script, then their function may have been twofold: to alert the goblins above that intruders were present, and to draw on protective enchantments meant to contain catastrophic breaches like this one. The idea that goblin writing holds power is consistent with goblin culture. Ragnarok I, one of the most powerful goblin leaders of the early Middle Ages, famously declared, "Words are steel, once forged, they do not bend." His proclamation, preserved in fragments of the Goblin Codex, implies that written inscriptions were considered not merely records but binding oaths and forces in themselves. To a goblin, chiseling script into a vault's wall was no different than placing a lock on the door. Both were measures of security, both enduring and both inviolable unless challenged with equal force. For wizards, however, the script remains almost entirely indecipherable. Hermione Granger, whose facility with languages is well known, is never described as understanding goblin writing. Even Bill Weasley, a curse breaker with years of experience working in Gringotts vaults in Egypt, never claims to interpret it. The secrecy is deliberate. Goblins guard their knowledge as fiercely as they guard their gold. It is said that when curious wizards attempted to copy the script in the 18th century, they awoke to find their parchments blank. The symbols vanished overnight. Such accounts suggest that goblin inscriptions may be magically self-protective, refusing to be duplicated outside the sanctioned walls of Gringotts itself. Some theories go further. The controversial writer Hector Flint proposed that the entire structural enchantment of Gringotts is bound to the script carved into its foundations. He argued that without these inscriptions, the enchantments keeping the vault safe, multiplying, burning, and confusing intruders would collapse. In his view, the goblins did not merely build the bank with stone and marble, they embedded its magical operating system directly into its architecture, using their unique script as the programming language. If true, this would explain why no wizard has ever successfully recreated Gringotts-level security, despite centuries of effort. Another dimension to this theory arises when considering the violent relationship between goblins and wizards. Throughout history, goblin rebellions have erupted over issues of wand ownership, treasure rights, and respect. If goblins indeed hold the secret to the strongest magical protections in existence, then their language becomes not just a cultural artifact, but a source of political leverage. Some historians argue that wizarding society's dependence on Gringotts is precisely what has kept goblins relatively protected, despite centuries of discrimination. Wizards may have power, but they cannot access or replicate the scripts that make Gringotts impregnable. In this sense, the glowing lines on the walls are silent reminders of goblin autonomy, etched defiantly into the heart of wizarding London. The secrecy surrounding goblin script also gives rise to legends. One popular tale claims that beneath the deepest vaults lies a hidden chamber where the first goblins carved a prophecy into the walls, a prophecy never translated into wizard tongue. Some whisper that it speaks of a time when goblins will reclaim all treasures forged by their hands, including Gryffindor's sword. Whether such a chamber exists remains unproven, but the story illustrates how even within wizard folklore, goblin inscriptions carry weight far beyond mere decoration. It is telling that in the moments of greatest danger within Gringotts, Harry often notices but cannot interpret his surroundings. When he and Griphook make their desperate way to Bellatrix's vault, Harry is essentially blind to the deeper mechanics of the bank's protection. Griphook, however, seems to know more than he reveals. His calmness and authority in guiding them through the tunnels may well come from an understanding of the inscriptions around them. The goblin never explains, but one can imagine his eyes flicking to the carved runes, reading them the way a conductor reads a musical score, anticipating the explosion of enchantments about to follow. Rowling herself provides subtle hints about this layered meaning. When describing the bank in Philosopher's Stone, she writes that the doors were engraved with warnings. On the surface, these are poetic phrases meant to scare off thieves, but to scholars of goblin studies, the word engraved is crucial. It suggests that even the warnings themselves may be tied to the script's magical force. The familiar rhyme, "Enter, stranger, but take heed, of what awaits the sin of greed," could well be underpinned by actual goblin runes that make the threat more than metaphor. The durability of goblin script is perhaps its most remarkable quality. Unlike wizarding wards, which must be refreshed and renewed by magical maintenance, goblin inscriptions seem to endure indefinitely. This explains why Gringotts has operated for centuries without a single recorded breach, until Harry Potter's dragon-fueled escape. Even then, the destruction did not come from wizarding cunning or spellwork, but from a brute force that overwhelmed the system. And still the bank endured. The script in its walls, though scarred by dragonfire, likely continues to pulse with the same stubborn strength it always has. For readers of the Harry Potter saga, these details invite a reconsideration of Gringotts not merely as a backdrop for thrilling adventures, but as a living fortress inscribed with the will of an ancient people. The next time one imagines stepping into its cavernous halls, the gleam of gold and marble should not be the only focus. Instead, one might look closer at the faint, jagged marks on the stone, lines that shimmer with secrets no wizard can claim to know. In those marks lies the essence of goblin magic, enduring, hidden, and powerful enough to sustain the greatest bank in the magical world. Number 22. Secret Cursed Vaults. Under the cold marble floors of Gringotts Wizarding Bank lies a labyrinth of vaults stretching deep beneath London, winding through caverns that most witches and wizards will never see. The public knows only the glittering lobby with its stern goblins, polished counters, and rattling carts that race along the tracks to the vaults of wealthy families. But there have always been whispers that some vaults are not merely used for storage. Some are sealed, chained, and cursed, their doors untouched for generations. The goblins never discuss them, and when asked, they avert their gaze, their long fingers tightening around ledger books as if such questions themselves were forbidden. This silence only fuels the idea that Gringotts is not just a bank, it is also a prison for the darkest objects in wizarding history. One of the most enduring legends tells of a vault once owned by a member of the Black family, a lineage infamous for their obsession with dark magic. According to rumour, this vault was not filled with gold or heirlooms, but with an ancient relic, a pendant said to curse any hand that dared hold it. The Blacks had long been associated with cursed objects, and when the last holder of the vault perished, the goblins supposedly locked it away, refusing even the heirs entry. The vaults are protected in ways that make safe any treasure, Griphook once explained to Harry, Ron, and Hermione in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. But protection sometimes means isolation, sealing an object so dangerous that even the goblin's own enchantments are barely enough to contain it. What makes these stories credible is the history of Vault 713, the very one from which Hagrid withdrew the small, grubby package on Harry's first visit to Diagon Alley. That vault was nearly empty, and yet guarded with enchantments so powerful that the Ministry itself recognized it as one of the most secure vaults in existence. It had once held the Philosopher's Stone. The goblins never denied the vault's existence, but they gave no detail about what it had contained before Hagrid's arrival. If such security was required for one object, how many other vaults had been sealed over the centuries for items too dangerous to circulate in the wizarding world? Some accounts suggest that not all cursed vaults belong to families. The Ministry of Magic itself is believed to have worked with Gringotts on occasion to hide artifacts that were too perilous to destroy and too tempting to leave in private hands. There are mentions in archival letters, though never confirmed, that certain confiscated items, perhaps remnants of the war against Grindelwald, were deposited in these vaults. Objects rumoured to be imbued with necromantic power, shards of wands linked to blood rituals, and even tomes bound in human skin were said to have been locked behind goblin-forged doors. The idea that Gringotts might double as a secret storage ground for the Ministry adds an extra layer of fear and fascination, for it suggests that even wizarding authorities trusted no place else. A particularly chilling tale circulates about a vault deep within the lowest levels of the bank, where the tunnels grow so hot that the walls drip with condensation. Some whisper that this vault houses a fragment of a cursed crown, possibly related to Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, which later became one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Though the diadem was ultimately hidden in the Room of Requirement, other artifacts imitating its power may have survived. Goblin blacksmiths sensitive to the aura of magic in metal are said to avoid those tunnels entirely, claiming the air itself hums with malice. Wizards who claim to have approached speak of voices whispering in forgotten languages, though their accounts are dismissed as the ramblings of thrill-seekers. The goblins' refusal to speak on these matters only heightens suspicion. In the books, goblins are portrayed as fiercely protective of their secrets. When Bill Weasley, a Gringotts employee, warns Harry in the Deathly Hallows that breaking into a vault is nearly impossible, he emphasizes that Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except perhaps Hogwarts. This declaration reveals much. Gringotts is not only secure, but its reputation rests on mystery. If word spread that the bank held cursed or dangerous items, customers might fear, yet at the same time, they would trust that nothing would ever escape those enchanted doors. Silence is both a business policy and a form of control. Legends of cursed vaults are not confined to the whispers of Diagon Alley. Hogwarts itself carried echoes of these secrets. Students spoke of a cursed vault hidden within the castle, connected in rumour to Gringotts' mysterious practices. In the story-rich corners of wizarding culture, people drew connections between the goblin-made vaults and the darker side of magical history. Families like the Malfoys, Lestranges, and Blacks, names associated with power and shadows, were all tied to vaults known to contain enchanted items. The Lestrange vault, as Harry himself saw, was filled with treasures cursed to multiply uncontrollably when touched. That one example was enough to prove that vaults could be traps as much as safes. Take the Lestrange vault in particular. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke into it, they nearly suffocated under the weight of multiplying treasure. This curse, designed to punish any thief, showed how goblin magic could weaponize possessions. Yet some historians suggest that this was not a simple protective curse, but a punishment for greed itself, aligning with goblin philosophy. If such dangerous enchantments could be placed on a family vault, what unimaginable horrors might be sealed in those vaults never opened, their keys long destroyed or withheld. There is also the persistent belief that goblins themselves use certain vaults to imprison objects they fear. Unlike wizards, goblins are deeply connected to the metals and magic of the earth. They can sense when an artifact is unstable, corrupted, or infused with destructive intent. It is said that when a goblin refuses to forge a weapon, it is because the metal speaks of blood. Likewise, some vaults may be the resting places for blades, crowns, or chains too malevolent to be wielded. These are not treasures but burdens, guarded not for profit but to prevent calamity. What makes the theory compelling is the goblins' known history of resistance against wizard control. During various goblin rebellions, records suggest that artifacts disappeared, never recovered by the ministry or wizarding families. Could Gringotts have secretly stored these relics away, not as treasure but as leverage, reminders of goblin power? To this day, when goblins are asked about such rebellions, their answers are curt, almost defensive. The possibility that their bank hides not just wizarding wealth, but also weapons of history's darkest conflicts, is difficult to ignore. The secrecy around these vaults has created a culture of myth that rivals the stories of Azkaban. Children in wizarding families are sometimes told never to speak too loudly of Gringotts' lower chambers, lest the curses locked inside hear their names. Some say that the walls themselves bear marks, scorchings that no spell has healed. Others insist that certain vault doors are warm to the touch, as if something inside still struggles to break free. While these tales may be exaggerated, their persistence across generations reveals how deeply the idea of cursed vaults has taken root in wizarding imagination. Consider how the goblins' silence contrasts with their usual pride. Goblins are often eager to boast of their skill in forging unbreakable locks and indestructible weapons. Yet when it comes to questions about abandoned vaults, their lips tighten. They neither confirm nor deny, leaving behind only suspicion. Their silence becomes an answer in itself, suggesting that the truth is more terrible than the wildest speculation. If nothing dangerous was stored there, why not dismiss the rumors outright? What remains undeniable is that Gringotts has always been a place where legends and reality blur. The ride down to the vaults is itself like a descent into myth, with dragons guarding entrances and enchantments that defy imagination. The cursed vaults, whether real or embellished, are a natural extension of this atmosphere. They are the shadows behind the gold, the hidden price of storing magic, too dangerous for daylight. They remind witches and wizards that power, once created, cannot always be destroyed. Sometimes it can only be locked away, waiting in silence for another age. These stories, woven from fragments of truth, memory, and fear, continue to haunt the wizarding world. Gringotts' gleaming counters may present the face of wealth and order, but beneath, in the caverns no one visits, lie doors that will never open again. Whether those vaults hold cursed treasures, forbidden relics, or simply the weight of history itself, they ensure that the legend of Gringotts remains more than that of a bank. It is a keeper of secrets, a guardian of shadows, and perhaps the silent jailer of magic, too dark to roam free. Number 23, illusions instead of real halls. Of all the mysteries within the wizarding world, Gringotts' Wizarding Bank holds a place both feared and respected, a fortress of gold and secrets. Hidden beneath the bustling streets of Diagon Alley, its winding passages, perilous vaults, and enchanted protections make it the most secure place in Britain after Hogwarts. Yet one little-known fact makes the bank even more dangerous and intriguing. Not every chamber inside its depths is real. Some are nothing more than masterfully woven illusions crafted to trap the unsuspecting. These phantom rooms, indistinguishable from reality, lure intruders into endless wandering among ghostly walls and glittering but untouchable treasures. To the uninitiated, they appear solid, even tangible, yet they are no more substantial than smoke in the moonlight. The existence of these illusory chambers becomes all the more fascinating when compared to what is already known from the books. Harry himself witnessed the fierce protective enchantments when he descended with Hagrid in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried to open the door, they'd be sucked through the doorway and trapped in there, Hagrid explained grimly. That warning prepared readers for danger, but even then Rowling never described the full extent of the deceptions crafted within. The idea that some rooms themselves are not real gives new meaning to the goblin's reputation for cunning. Imagine a thief who believes he has broken through security, only to find himself surrounded by gold, only to discover that the glittering coins melt into nothingness, walls shifting endlessly, doors looping back upon themselves until madness sets in. One account, passed through whispers among goblin clerks, tells of a wizard thief named Alaric Burke, a distant cousin of the infamous Caractacus Burke, co-founder of Borgin and Burke's. Alaric once attempted to seize what he believed to be an abandoned vault. Documents later revealed that he had bribed a disloyal clerk for partial blueprints of the tunnels. But the map failed him. The chamber he entered was not a vault at all, but one of the illusions designed by the goblins centuries earlier. For hours he stumbled past phantom treasure chests stacked to the ceiling, each chest seeming to vanish as he reached for it. Eventually, when the magic consumed his stamina, goblin wardens found him collapsed against a wall that did not exist. His punishment was severe, but the lesson lingered. The bank itself could fight intruders without ever raising an alarm. The craftsmanship of such illusions cannot be underestimated. Goblin magic has long been regarded as separate from and in many ways superior to human wizardry when it comes to enchantments on metal and stone. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Bill Weasley, a Gringotts cursebreaker, explains how goblin-wrought armor could resist charms and even reject magical ownership. Goblin-wrought silver repels ordinary magic so effectively that wizardkind has been unable to duplicate it. If their forges could bind such power into weapons, how much more formidable might their illusions be when woven into the very foundations of the bank? It is not mere trickery of the eye like a simple disillusionment charm, but a layered magic that confuses the senses, compelling the intruder to believe in the unreality surrounding them. Harry, Ron, and Hermione's own journey into Bellatrix Lestrange's vault in Deathly Hallows revealed only a fraction of the bank's traps. The vault was cursed with the Gemino spell, duplicating every object touched into burning, blistering replicas. Yet what they faced was tangible, a multiplying inferno of solid gold. The illusion chambers differ in that they produce nothing tangible, only mirages of grandeur and shifting hallways. Imagine if the trio had stumbled. Not into Bellatrix's real vault, but into one of these phantom ones. Their desperate mission could have ended in failure, lost forever in endless corridors of vanishing doors and mocking treasures that turned to dust. Voldemort's quest for the Horcrux hidden within might have been undone not by Gryffindor courage, but by goblin illusions. The goblins' secrecy regarding these false rooms is absolute. Only the highest among their kind, the elder keepers of the vaults, know the incantations that reveal which doors conceal reality and which conceal illusion. It is said that the key phrase is not merely spoken but sung in the ancient goblin tongue, a language foreign and impenetrable to human ears. Wizards attempting to mimic it fail, for the syllables require not just sound but intent, that unique magical resonance carried in goblin blood. This explains why even skilled curse-breakers like Bill Weasley never discussed these phantom chambers. He himself may never have been permitted to witness them, let alone record them. One might ask whether Dumbledore, who seemed to know the hidden corners of wizarding life, ever encountered such deceptions. While no record confirms it, his cryptic knowledge of Gringotts' depths in Deathly Hallows hints at secrets untold. He once remarked to Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Though not directly about Gringotts, his words always concealed layers. Perhaps he, too, understood that the illusions of power and wealth, phantom rooms filled with false treasures, were metaphors made real in the Goblin Bank. Those who chased them were doomed to find themselves empty-handed. The design of the illusions seems to follow a cruel elegance. Testimonies suggest that intruders often wander in circles, doors reappearing where they had not been, staircases stretching infinitely before collapsing into fog. Some speak of phantom goblins appearing at the edge of sight, their faces leering, only to vanish when confronted. Such illusions prey not only on sight but on the very sense of orientation, dislocating a wizard's perception of time and space. A thief might believe days have passed when in truth only hours have gone by. This distortion ensures that when the goblins finally capture the intruder, the victim is broken not by shackles but by despair. Consider also the symbolism behind these illusions. Gringotts is not merely a bank, it is a fortress of control. The goblins, historically distrustful of wizardkind due to centuries of betrayal, designed their institution to mock intruders. The illusions reflect wizardly greed, treasure that cannot be touched, wealth that evaporates, corridors that never lead to victory. In many ways, the goblins turned the very sins of wizards against them, punishing avarice with phantoms. One might even view these chambers as moral lessons, though harsh ones, crafted not to redeem, but to humiliate. The story of Alaric Burke is not the only whisper of these illusions. Another tale speaks of Mulciber, a dark wizard from Voldemort's inner circle. While many Death Eaters relied on brute force, Mulciber prided himself on stealth. During the First Wizarding War, he reportedly sought to infiltrate Gringotts to seize wealth for the Dark Lord. Records vanish after his attempt. Some say he was captured, others that he was lost forever in a phantom vault, his body never recovered. The absence of his name among those imprisoned in Azkaban during that period lends weight to the legend that he became a permanent ghost within Gringotts, trapped in illusions until his mind collapsed. It is worth noting that even goblins themselves are not entirely immune to their creations. While they alone possess the counter-incantations, accidents have occurred. The goblin Ragnok the Younger once miscast the revealing charm, leaving his apprentice trapped within a phantom corridor for nearly 3 days. Though rescued unharmed, the apprentice never fully recovered his confidence, and his story became a warning within the goblin community. Power, even in goblin hands, carries risk when wielded against reality itself. The illusions raise another question. How many of the vaults described to customers are truly real? Wizards trust goblins with fortunes spanning centuries, but could some of these supposed chambers be illusions used to deceive not intruders, but depositors? If so, it would be the ultimate act of goblin cunning, maintaining the appearance of treasure while hiding the true vault elsewhere. While no evidence confirms such deceit, the secrecy of goblins makes the theory impossible to dismiss. Wizards who dared question such matters rarely received more than a scowl and a curt dismissal. In terms of magical theory, these illusionary vaults suggest enchantments beyond ordinary glamour charms. They resemble something closer to the protean charm which links objects across space, or even the enchantments on the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts. Both manipulate reality to create what is needed or expected. The difference lies in intent. The Room of Requirement serves to help. The phantom rooms of Gringotts exist to trap and punish. In that sense, they represent a darker, harsher branch of magic, one uniquely goblin in flavor, merciless in its logic. The moral of these stories becomes clear through their artistry. Gringotts is not merely a place of safekeeping, but a labyrinth designed to remind intruders of their smallness. The illusions ensure that the greedy and ambitious will never triumph through cunning alone. Harry's world constantly emphasized that bravery, loyalty, and love triumphed over deceit and power. Gringotts itself reflects this truth. Those who enter without trust, without the rightful guidance of goblins, are doomed to chase shadows forever, lost in illusions that mock their desires. Thus the bank remains unbroken not only by locks and dragons, but by the very unreality of its own halls. Wizards who walk through its doors see marble counters and goblin tellers, vaults that plunge deep underground, dragons chained in the darkness. Yet behind some of those doors lies nothing at all, only the cruel mirage of riches. It is a reminder that in the wizarding world, the most dangerous magic is not fire or curse, but deception so perfect that even the boldest thief cannot tell the difference between stone and smoke. Number 24. Vaults bound to blood. Gringotts has always stood as the most impenetrable institution in the wizarding world, a place where even the bravest witches and wizards hesitate before challenging its wards. Among the many layers of enchantments that cloak the white marble building and its twisting underground caverns, the most chilling and fascinating of all is the existence of vaults tied not merely to keys or goblin records, but to the blood of their owners. The very idea suggests a kind of magic that is both intimate and dangerous, binding wealth and heritage to something deeper than parchment or locks. Blood magic, though rarely spoken of openly, is among the oldest traditions in wizardry, and nowhere is it displayed more fearsomely than in the blood-bound vaults of Gringotts. The vault of Bellatrix Lestrange offers perhaps the clearest glimpse into the deadly lengths to which Gringotts will go in its defense of bloodline property. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Hermione and Ron infiltrate the Lestrange vault in search of Helga Hufflepuff's cup, they are immediately confronted by a horror beyond ordinary curses. The objects within began to multiply, to burn and scald their skin, Rowling describes, portraying enchantments that did not simply protect against theft, but actively punished intruders. Though this particular vault was warded with the Gemino and Flagranti curses, goblin whispers have long suggested that such defences were only the outer skin of a darker, older protection. Protections rooted in the very blood of the Lestrange family, ensuring that no hand but theirs could touch their treasures without consequence. Blood wards are not mentioned in the Ministry's official descriptions of Gringotts security, but historians of wizarding banking note the practice stretching back centuries. Goblin-run institutions, unlike human establishments, never relied solely on documentation or signatures. In their eyes, ownership was not a matter of paperwork, it was a matter of lineage. The bond of blood carried weight that could not be forged or stolen. To enter a blood-bound vault, one must offer a trace of themselves, often a cut on the palm pressed against the vault's ancient metal surface. If the blood resonates with the enchantments woven into the door, the vault surrenders its secrets. If not, the very magic of the stone awakens, delivering consequences that range from humiliating burns to catastrophic loss of magical ability. Goblins would shrug at such risks, considering them a fair balance for attempting to steal what was never yours. The story of Vault 619, once belonging to a lesser-known pure-blood family called the Mulcibers, illustrates the merciless nature of such protections. During the turbulent years following the First Wizarding War, one desperate cousin, cut off from inheritance, attempted to force open the vault by disguising himself as the rightful heir. The goblins permitted him to approach, curious to see whether his deception would pass the ward. When his hand touched the silver surface, he screamed as if fire coursed through his veins. Witnesses recounted that he staggered back, wand falling from his grasp, and from that day forward he could never cast so much as a lumos. The vault remained sealed, cold and indifferent to his suffering, and the goblins declared the punishment just. This tale, though passed around in hushed tones, underscores the bank's true philosophy. Gringotts does not forgive liars, and blood magic exposes every fraud. Harry's first encounter with Gringotts in Philosopher's Stone already hinted at this sense of awe and menace. Though the vault he visited then, his parents' modest savings vault, opened simply at the touch of a key, Hagrid's grave tone impressed the point. "Best place for anything ye want to keep safe, 'cept maybe Hogwarts." That assurance carried the weight of goblin enchantments far beyond ordinary locks. For the wealthiest families, like the Blacks, Malfoys, or Lestranges, the vault was more than a hiding place. It was a fortress designed to acknowledge their blood and reject all others. And if such a vault was ever breached, as happened during the trio's reckless raid, the world understood that only desperation, not reason, had driven the intruders to attempt the impossible. The principle behind blood-bound vaults aligns with other blood magic scattered across wizarding history. The most famous example, of course, is the protection Lily Potter left on Harry, which Dumbledore described as the ancient magic of blood. That act of sacrifice allowed her son to live even under Voldemort's curse. In the same vein, though less noble, blood-bound vaults at Gringotts operate on the idea that blood is more permanent than parchment and more binding than chains. Goblins may not speak in sentimental terms, but they recognized early that to tie treasure to lineage was to ensure loyalty and deterrence. The very skin of a family member could be the key, and the very blood of a stranger could become their undoing. For this reason, goblins often warn witches and wizards never to underestimate the personal cost of attempting to defy Gringotts. Bill Weasley, who worked as a curse breaker for the bank, once told his family stories of treasure hunters and criminals who underestimated goblin craft. "They'll bleed you dry in more ways than one," he jested, but his words carried truth. In lands far from London, he encountered tombs where goblins had tested their magic centuries earlier, weaving blood wards into stone that still pulsed with warning. If such power remained potent in forgotten ruins, one can only imagine the intensity of protections active in the heart of Diagon Alley. The consequences of breaching a blood-bound vault are deliberately disproportionate. Ordinary wizarding law might send a thief to Azkaban, but Gringotts ensures the punishment arrives instantly. The vault does not wait for trials or evidence. The goblins believe the vault itself is judge and executioner. In cases where the punishment involves magical burns, the scars remain visible for life, serving as a warning to others. In darker tales, intruders have collapsed within seconds, drained of their magical core, left as hollow shells unable to summon a spark. Some ministry officials have questioned the morality of such protections, but they have never dared challenge the goblins' authority. Gringotts is, after all, not subject to wizarding law in its deepest chambers. What fascinates many scholars is the precision with which these blood wards operate. They do not simply reject any foreign wizard. Instead, they seem to measure the closeness of blood ties. For instance, a direct descendant might pass unscathed, while a distant cousin may feel the sting of rejection if the enchantment was crafted narrowly. This precision reflects goblin craftsmanship at its height, where runes and charms intertwine with the essence of genealogy itself. It also reveals the unsettling truth that Gringotts vaults know more about wizarding families than the families themselves. The vault, in effect, recognizes heirs even before wills are read, and it does so with ruthless clarity. A chilling example surfaced in the Black family history. When Phineas Nigellus Black passed away, rumors whispered that one of his illegitimate descendants sought to prove his right by entering a vault tied to the Black bloodline. When the man touched the door, the vault reportedly glowed faintly but did not open, as if acknowledging his blood yet refusing him full access. The vault had been enchanted to accept only legitimate heirs recognized by Goblin record. In that moment, the intruder not only lost his chance at fortune, but his shame was etched into his very skin, leaving a burn across his palm in the shape of the family crest. Blood wards, it seems, do not merely protect treasure, they pronounce judgment. This intertwining of wealth, family, and punishment reveals why Gringotts has never been successfully robbed, at least not without catastrophic consequences. The trio's escape on the back of a dragon stands as the sole exception, and even then it was not victory, but survival. They never defeated the vault itself, they merely outpaced its wrath. Like nothing human could have created, Harry thought, recalling the enchantments erupting around them. Indeed, nothing human had. It was goblin craft, ancient and relentless, fused with the most personal of human ties, blood. In artistic terms, blood-bound vaults transform Gringotts into something more than a bank. They render it a living organism, a place where the walls themselves recognize kin and expel intruders like a body-fighting infection. Each vault becomes an extension of its family, breathing through bloodlines, whispering their names through runes only goblins understand. To walk into such a vault is to walk into a family's history, to be judged by the very essence of their magic, and to violate such sanctity is to invite destruction without appeal. Even the fearsome goblins themselves treat these wards with reverence. Ragnarok I, one of the early goblin leaders, famously declared that wealth must answer to blood, not to whim. His words became a guiding principle in Gringotts, ensuring that treasure could not be claimed merely by conquest or theft. In this sense, blood-bound vaults carry a moral lesson twisted in iron. They enforce loyalty to heritage, punishing betrayal, and theft with an impartial cruelty. For families that pride themselves on pure blood status, such vaults are not just financial tools but symbols of continuity, a proof that their lineage is quite literally written into stone. The presence of these vaults also casts an eerie shadow over wizarding society as a whole. While they protect, they also exclude, reinforcing the divisions between families of long lineage and those without such history. Muggle-born witches and wizards, no matter how talented, could never claim the kind of security these vaults offer. The very magic of Gringotts draws a line between those whose blood has been steeped in wizardry for generations and those whose veins carry a newer spark. In this way, the bank mirrors the prejudices of the society it serves, wielding blood not just as protection, but as a form of hierarchy. Yet for all its shadows, the fascination endures. Readers of wizarding history continue to marvel at the audacity of such enchantments, where blood itself becomes the key and the curse. Gringotts, through these vaults, has ensured that no amount of cleverness or dark magic can rival the most intimate bond of all. "Enter, stranger, but take heed," the warning carved above the doors declares. For those who know the truth of blood-bound vaults, that warning is not a metaphor, but a promise that to enter uninvited is to risk not only your life but your very magic, leaving behind nothing but scars and silence. Number 25, Ancient Contract with the Ministry. Of all the mysteries in the wizarding world, few inspire as much awe and suspicion as Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Behind the marble counters, clinking gold and stern goblin tellers, there is more than a financial institution at work. There is an ancient pact whispered in the corridors of the Ministry of Magic, but never written in official records. The truth is that Gringotts does not stand merely because goblins are shrewd with numbers or skilled with enchantments, but because of a delicate balance of power set in motion centuries ago. This balance is preserved through a secret agreement between the Goblin Nation and the Ministry of Magic, one so fragile that any violation might plunge the wizarding world into chaos. The foundation of this agreement traces back to the early 18th century, during a period of unrest when goblin rebellions erupted with frightening frequency. Names such as Urg the Unclean and Ranrock the Defiant became symbols of goblin defiance against wizarding dominance. It was in the aftermath of those bloody conflicts that wizards realized their own society's financial stability rested not on their spells, but on goblin cooperation. The ministry, newly formed and still unsteady, entered into negotiations that culminated in a covenant. Wizards would not interfere in the daily governance of Gringotts, and goblins, in return, would ensure the security and neutrality of all deposits. The ministry's officials recognized that trying to control goblin banking practices would lead only to more rebellions, and rebellions, as history showed, drained wizarding resources dangerously thin. The language of the agreement was never published, and no record of it appears in the ministry's public archives, but its influence is visible. When Harry Potter entered Gringotts for the first time with Hagrid, he was told, "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed." Those words were not mere warning charms carved into the marble floors. They echoed the pact itself. They signalled to all witches and wizards that the goblins governed the bank with total authority. To break those rules was to defy the institution's guardians and, by extension, threaten the fragile. Peace that allowed Gringotts to function without oversight from wizard-kind. The pact's power can be seen in the very architecture of Gringotts. Its twisting underground vaults, layered with dragon-guarded chambers and ancient enchantments, were not simply goblin innovations. They were a declaration of independence. Wizards might wield wands, but goblins commanded stone, metal, and fire. The ministry dared not dictate how these defenses were designed, for doing so would risk violating the treaty. Every wizard who descended into those depths did so on goblin terms, a subtle reminder that the ministry's authority ended at the marble doors. In that sense, every visit to the bank was not just a transaction, but a ceremony reaffirming the pact. It is worth considering how this ancient understanding survived through centuries of turbulence. During the rise of Lord Voldemort, when so many institutions bent to his will, Gringotts remained neutral. Even in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when the ministry was under Voldemort's control, goblins acted with their own interest, not with loyalty to wizardkind. The daring break-in by Harry, Ron, and Hermione into Bellatrix Lestrange's vault demonstrated how little sway the ministry truly had over Gringotts. The goblins, particularly Griphook, made decisions based on goblin law and tradition, not wizard decree. The pact had endured even in the darkest of times, and that endurance is proof of its binding nature. A revealing example comes from the reign of Minister Millicent Bagnold, who held office before Cornelius Fudge. During her tenure, goblins resisted a proposed tax on high-value vaults. Instead of enforcing it, the ministry quickly withdrew the legislation, citing complexities of goblin autonomy. Insiders knew it was fear of triggering a breach of the ancient pact. This moment in history is rarely mentioned in textbooks, but it shows how much the ministry respected, perhaps feared, the limits set by goblins. A single tax, if imposed without goblin consent, might have been enough to spark rebellion. Bagnold's quick retreat was less a gesture of diplomacy than a recognition that wizards could not afford to ignite a new war over gold. The tension between wizard law and goblin custom was not merely political, it was deeply cultural. Goblins had their own views on ownership, famously believing that the maker of an item retained its true claim even after it was sold. This clashed with wizarding notions of property, as seen in the conflict over Gryffindor's sword. Yet even this disagreement was contained by the pact. Wizards could argue over artifacts, but so long as deposits in Gringotts remained safe, the ministry refrained from interference. "Safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe," Hagrid told Harry in Philosopher's Stone. Those words were not just prideful boasting. They were part of the agreement's legacy. Goblins had sworn to keep vaults secure, and in exchange, wizards stepped back from imposing their laws. One cannot forget the delicate role of individuals in upholding this ancient treaty. Bartemius Crouch Sr., known for his strictness in other areas of magical law, deliberately avoided meddling in goblin financial customs when he served as head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. His restraint is telling, for Crouch was otherwise infamous for his iron grip on law enforcement. That he of all wizards respected goblin autonomy is strong evidence of how untouchable the pact made Gringotts. Even a man unafraid to use unforgivable curses on captured Death Eaters would not test the patience of goblin bankers. Yet the pact's protection comes with risk. It is, after all, an agreement balanced on trust. The goblins secure deposits, but what happens if their definition of security diverges from the ministry's? Consider the case of Ludo Bagman, who infamously racked up debts with goblins during the Triwizard Tournament. The ministry could do nothing to intervene on his behalf. Goblin law prevailed, and Bagman's vault was left at the mercy of goblin collectors. The ministry's impotence in this matter reminded all of Wizarding Britain that Gringotts did not bend to wizard law, no matter the status of the wizard involved. The danger of a broken pact is not theoretical. Goblin uprisings scar wizarding history. They were brutal, fueled not only by bloodshed, but by centuries of mistrust. If the ministry ever attempted to seize control of Gringotts under the pretext of public safety, goblins could see it as a violation and rise again. Such a rebellion in the modern age would not be confined to the streets of Diagon Alley. With vaults filled with enchanted treasures, cursed artifacts, and even dragon-guarded chambers, a goblin revolt could unleash forces no wizard ministry could contain. It is no exaggeration to say that the survival of wizarding society depends on the ministry's respect for the pact. In a broader sense, the pact reveals a paradox at the heart of wizarding governance. The Ministry of Magic presents itself as the ultimate authority in Britain, yet its power is limited by agreements with non-human magical beings. The goblins of Gringotts embody this paradox most vividly. Their bank is central to wizard life. Every wand purchase, every broomstick trade, every cauldron sale passes through its vaults. Yet the ministry bows to their sovereignty within the bank. It is a reminder that wizardkind, for all their dominance, are not the sole masters of their world. The presence of dragons guarding high-security vaults is more than a deterrent against thieves. It is a symbol of goblin independence. No ministry official dares order their removal, for to do so would breach the agreement. When Harry and his friends encountered the dragon during their desperate escape, it was proof that goblins, not wizards, dictated the bank's defences. The ministry's silence afterward was equally telling. Even after such a catastrophic breach of security, the ministry did not attempt to assert control over Gringotts. To do so would have meant breaking the covenant and risking war. When historians reflect on wizarding stability, they often credit the ministry's bureaucracy or Dumbledore's leadership during dark times. Yet beneath those layers lies the unspoken truth. Wizarding Britain stands because goblins choose not to destabilize it. The pact that binds Gringotts to the ministry is a cornerstone of that choice. To most witches and wizards, it is invisible. They queue at the counters, deposit their galleons, and leave without realizing they are participants in a centuries-old bargain. But the goblins remember, and the ministry remembers, even if the average wizard does not. Ultimately, the story of this ancient agreement is one of fragile coexistence. Gringotts is a bank, yes, but also a fortress of goblin sovereignty. The ministry is an authority, yes, but also a body restrained by its own promises. Every coin that clinks in the marble hallways is a reminder of the pact. And every whisper of rebellion in goblin history warns what might happen if that pact were ever broken. The wizarding world, for all its enchantments and illusions of control, rests on this quiet, unpublicized truth that gold and trust, guarded in goblin hands, keep the peace as surely as any wand. Number 26. Hidden exits into London. Gringotts has always been portrayed in the wizarding world as the most secure place one could possibly imagine, second only to Hogwarts. Its marble floors, tall pillars, and goblin guards are known to every witch and wizard who has ever set foot inside. Yet behind the shining facade, under the rattling carts that plunge deeper into the subterranean vaults, there exists another reality whispered of only in passing. Few realize that the labyrinth beneath London does not end with the storage chambers of the wealthy. The goblins, with their obsession for both secrecy and leverage, carved pathways long before Diagon Alley was even established. These were not mere extensions of their underground domain, but deliberate routes, weaving through ancient rock, surfacing in places where no wizard would expect. These exits, hidden behind layers of enchantment, led into the very heart of Muggle London, giving Gringotts an invisible network of escape and access points designed to outlast both governments and wars. When Harry Potter first entered Gringotts in Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid assured him, "There ain't no place safer, except perhaps Hogwarts." That statement, while true in spirit, conceals a darker undertone. Security in Gringotts was never solely about defending against break-ins. It was also about ensuring those inside could escape if the worst happened. During the centuries of its operation, the goblins faced threats not from wizards seeking to plunder the vaults, but from political uprisings and even violent Muggle revolts that shook the foundations of London itself. In such times, the secret tunnels provided lifelines, allowing goblins and sometimes their more trusted clients to disappear into the city above without ever being seen leaving through the main doors. The earliest rumours trace these secret ways back to the goblin rebellions of the 17th century. The chronicles of Urg the Unclean, though filled with bitterness toward wizards, mention veins of stone that lead into the city of men. Urg himself is said to have used a passage from beneath Gringotts to escape Aura pursuit, vanishing near the banks of the Thames, though wizard historians often dismissed these accounts as exaggerations. The details align with later discoveries. Certain ministry documents in the Department of Magical Transportation note unexplained magical surges in London sewer systems, particularly in areas like Fleet Street and Southwark, suggesting that the goblins had indeed tunnelled far beyond the boundaries of Diagon Alley. What makes these hidden exits so fascinating is not just their existence, but their role in wizarding history. The escape of the notorious gold thief Caractacus Burke, co-founder of Borgin & Burke's, is one of the most striking examples. Arrested in 1891 for illicit dealings in cursed objects, Burke was reportedly escorted under guard to Gringotts for a forced retrieval of his hoarded wealth. Yet before he ever reached his vault, he vanished. Witnesses described the goblins halting the cart at a dim junction, then insisting that the track had collapsed. Minutes later, Burke was gone, his captors baffled. Though never proven, many believed he was ushered into one of the concealed tunnels, slipping out near Charing Cross and fleeing into the bustling Muggle crowds. His subsequent reappearance in Knockturn Alley only fueled speculation that he had been aided by discontented goblins, eager to humiliate wizarding law enforcement. The construction of these passages was not haphazard. Goblins are famed for their skill in working with stone and metal, and Gringotts itself stands as their greatest architectural triumph. The hidden exits bore the marks of that craftsmanship. Accounts from curse breakers in the early 20th century speak of narrow shafts reinforced with enchanted iron, stairwells spiraling so tightly that only those who knew the precise charms could navigate without triggering collapses. Ancient sigils lined the walls, not designed for aesthetic, but for defense, ensuring that any wizard attempting entry from the outside would find themselves trapped in loops or crushed under sudden cave-ins. The tunnels were not merely secret corridors, they were weapons, a way to keep control firmly in goblin hands. What lends weight to these stories is how often strange disappearances in London coincided with activity at Gringotts. In 1943, during the same year that Tom Riddle opened the Chamber of Secrets, a small group of Muggle workers repairing the underground near King's Cross reported hearing screeching wheels and voices speaking in a strange tongue deep beneath the station. The incident was dismissed as wartime stress, but records in the Daily Prophet archives show that several goblins resigned from Gringotts that same week under mysterious circumstances. Could it be that Riddle, always seeking power and allies, had pressed some of these secrets from the goblins, or at least discovered their existence? While no definitive proof links him to the hidden exits, the timing has led many researchers to suspect his awareness of them. The most dramatic episode linked to the tunnels came decades later during the First Wizarding War. Death Eaters, desperate to seize control of Gringotts' wealth, staged a violent incursion in 1980. Though quickly suppressed by both Aurors and goblins, 3 masked figures reportedly vanished mid-battle. Ministry investigators concluded they had been obliterated by defensive curses. Yet later intelligence suggested otherwise. One of the Death Eaters, Antonin Dolohov, was spotted in Soho only hours after the raid, wounded but alive. How could he have emerged so far from Diagon Alley without crossing known magical barriers? The only plausible explanation was that he had stumbled or been led into one of the goblins' subterranean escape routes. Harry himself may have brushed against this hidden world during his own break-in to Gringotts in Deathly Hallows. As he, Ron, and Hermione clung to the sides of the cart, plunging deeper into the bowels of the bank, the book notes, the cart rattled and swayed as it sped ever downward, now twisting around corners, now gliding smoothly along straight, dark passages. It is precisely those twisting corners and branching passages that scholars believe may have hidden the side tunnels. When the trio barely escaped on the back of a dragon, they had no need for the secret exits, but one wonders whether goblins watching their daring escape were reminded of the other, quieter, lying dormant beneath their feet. The goblins' reluctance to reveal these exits stems from more than just paranoia. Control over access to and from Gringotts represents power. By knowing where the tunnels lead, goblins hold the ability to grant or deny passage in times of crisis. Some even theorize that part of their bargaining strength with the Ministry derives from these secrets. After all, what wizarding government could afford to challenge goblins openly if the creatures could simply vanish into London with both gold and records, leaving wizard society exposed and humiliated? The exits were never meant for common clients, nor even for wizarding allies. They were tools of leverage, a reminder that while wizards may dominate by numbers and spells, goblins command the earth beneath their feet. Legends also tell of moments when the exits were used for purposes far nobler than theft or flight. During the Blitz of 1940, when Muggle bombs rained upon London, Gringotts' underground chambers trembled under the impact. Diagon Alley itself risked exposure and collapse. It is whispered that goblins secretly guided a handful of wizarding families out through concealed stairways into safer quarters of the city, blending them among Muggles to preserve their lives. These families never publicly acknowledged the help, but descendants have quietly maintained gratitude toward goblin kind, keeping alive stories of stone doors opening where there should have been none.